Today we're talking about the art of divorce negotiation and how to leverage what your spouse values most. Sounds a little strange, doesn't it? So here's the deal. Divorce negotiations often feel like a battlefield, and everybody is vying for their stand and position. There's an incredible amount of emotional turmoil on both sides. There's fear, anger, frustration on both sides. And so how do you negotiate amidst that? Today's guest is Brenda Bridges, and we're going to be talking about how strategy, not conflict, is what leads to the best outcomes. And Brenda's going to be talking to us about how to be strategic through your negotiations. Brenda Bridges knows firsthand how high stakes divorce negotiations can be. She built an entire career helping people avoid the financial and emotional pitfalls that she faced. And Brenda is a certified divorce financial analyst. She's a divorce coach and a mediator, and she brings a wealth of experience to the table. I'm going to let you read about the episode and more about Brenda in the show notes. We're going to dive right in. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, and this is one that our listeners could really benefit from because it's not even just the negotiations at the table, right? It's the negotiations in day-to-day life once the decision has been made and you're now in this contentious process. And so before we dive into all of that, I love to bring a piece of my guest's humanity to my listeners. And so could you share with us something that you're really proud of in your life? And maybe something that is not necessarily business oriented would be
Yeah,
beautiful.
first place I go is my kids. I'm really proud of my kids. They're just good, amazing humans. They are all following their own bliss and adulting really well. And I miss them terribly, but I know that we did a good job raising them because they're all out there doing their thing.
And the ages, mine are 26 and 28. What do you have?
28, 25, 23.
Wow. Well, kudos to you. And what a beautiful answer.
Yeah, they're good people.
So, as we enter this conversation about negotiations, what would you say are the foundational tenets of entering both divorce and the divorce negotiation well when it comes to negotiations?
So I think what I see a lot of is people are told, treat this like a business. Treat this, it's no longer relational. It is a business negotiation. I was on a radio show a couple of weeks ago and one of the hosts was like, it's just a business negotiation. Like, no, it's not. It is so emotionally laden. It is so triggering. It is so, especially for a long-term marriage, but it also can be for a short-term marriage. There's such a depth of emotion and things that people are dealing with. And then they're told, just shut that off and use your logic and make common sense decisions.
And meanwhile, I'm living in my amygdala, in my fight, flight, or freeze, and you're telling me
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex. I can't even travel there right now.
No, it is off limits. So I think that's kind of a starting place. And once we can say, let's not shut that down, let's acknowledge it and figure out like, what is going on there. Give people tool sets in negotiations, not to understand the math, but that it's important. You're making probably the most high stakes decisions of your life.
100%, which only adds to the emotional angst because now it's like pressure much.
Yeah, right. And then if we can start to help people acknowledge what they're going through, and like we talk about negotiating strategies, but really getting people to put themselves in a good mindset to approach that and giving tools to first recognize what's going on. Like I remember, and this has been a long time now, but as I was going through my divorce, there would be times where I would see my going to be ex and I would literally have the freeze response and I would start sweating and shaking. And it was a visceral physical response. I was just so locked down.
And chances are you couldn't have made a very good decision in that moment.
No, I could barely breathe, much less make a good decision. So especially in a high conflict situation, if we can start recognizing what we're going through in our bodies, in our mind, in our hearts, in our emotions, and then start developing tools to pay attention to that so you can get through it, and then start making better decisions, more well-equipped decisions, calmer decisions. But I feel like the whole story about, oh, just treat it like a business,
It's unrealistic.
it's unrealistic, and it really shortchanges what people are going through as they go through the process.
So
Like,
let's drill a little bit into that, because what I'm hearing you say, and I love that, is really the first step is to develop awareness around how your emotions are showing up in your body, right? So we've got our trauma reactions and our triggers. And do you know what your tells are when you're emotionally dysregulated? So for me, it's all neck and shoulders, not my stomach, not anything. My neck and shoulders are like naughty, naughty, naughty. I can barely turn to the left and right. Do you know what your tell is?
my worst, like when I'm really activated, is truly shaking. I will physically shake. But other than that, mine is stomach. It's definitely, I feel it in my gut. And if I start to feel that, I need to pay attention to, like, where is this coming from? What is triggering me? Why am I getting this feeling? And we've been taught, especially as women, but as people in our society, to kind of ignore our body,
Right,
ignore, like, just shut that down and be, the whole message is shut that down and be logical.
right, right, right.
But we're not. We're behavioral. We're emotional creatures. So instead of being told, shut it down, what if we're told, pay attention to that?
Because it's informing you of something. I
Yeah.
interviewed a woman named Carla McLaren a couple of years ago, and she wrote a book, The Genius in All Your Emotions. And she said, every emotion we feel is here to, number one, inform us. So fear, there's danger. What am I afraid of? And then to guide us to move in a way. And then we're supposed to let it go. That's the part we don't do so well. But I think for our conversation today, to just speak directly to the audience, that becoming aware, if you don't know what your tell is, then immediately start thinking about it. The next time you get triggered, if you can step away and say, where is it? Where is it in my body? Are my palms sweaty? Is my stomach nodding? Is my heart pounding? Is my neck and shoulders all knotted up? Once somebody knows their tell, do you have certain strategies or tools to help them regulate so they get back into a calm state?
I think more than me having the tool, I mean, I can, breathing exercises is the first thing that comes to mind. For me, that works really well. Tapping, that
Mm.
something that works well. And you can do it. You can be sitting at a collaborative table with your collaborative team. So the attorneys, the coach, the financial neutral, you can tap under the table if that works for you. So it really is, I think, kind of experimental, figuring out, okay, I'm feeling this thing, my tell, the thing in my body that is making me uncomfortable. Practicing beforehand, what might soothe you, what might bring you down. Is it box breathing? Is it tapping? Maybe you need to leave the room, and there's nothing wrong with that. To just say, I need a minute and go take a walk.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And for those who don't know box breathing, it's just a 4-time count. And so whether you're breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4, or maybe that's 6, or maybe that's 10, depending on your lung capacity. When you do 3 rounds of box breathing, your system just naturally regulates. It is one of the easiest. You can do it anywhere. Nobody needs to know. So now we've got acknowledge and notice your emotions and how they're showing up in your body. Use your body's reaction as the tell that you need to regulate, right? Because otherwise, you're not in your prefrontal cortex, you're not accessing your rational mind. And this is something that you can use whether you're walking into the kitchen and just got yelled at by your spouse, or if you're sitting at the negotiation table in a 4-way. What comes next?
For the individual going through it, I think once you can get to the point where you realize how to soothe yourself, to calm yourself, to realize what's going on is really bodily. It's not logical. And if you can get through the other side of that, then you can start paying attention to the decisions that are being made. And here's where kind of flip the script, because those responses you're having are a result of a triggering event, most likely from the other party. So you've had this long-standing relationship. Now you're going through a divorce process, highly adversarial. That's the way the system is set up, especially if you're going through litigation, but maybe even if you're mediating or doing collaborative process. So if you're in this and you're being triggered by the other person, I think knowing how to handle it yourself is really important. You can control that, but also recognizing the trigger. What is the thing the other person is doing that is taking you out of your body? What is the thing that is causing you to not think logically, or to be really emotional, or to be just triggered? So if you start, I would coach clients that if you start like self-talking or out loud talking about the other person, you always do this. You never do this. You're getting in that languaging of the past, the things that have perhaps caused you trauma, the things that have landed you probably in the process of getting divorced. Replaying those as you're going through the divorce is not beneficial to you. So refighting the fights that you've had throughout your marriage isn't going to solve what you need to have solved at this time. So if you're able to look at, maybe your spouse rolls their eyes at you and then talks about you in third person, maybe those are triggers. So you're having a conversation in the kitchen or at the negotiating table, and they roll their eyes and they say to the attorney or the neighbor who's over, she always does this thing, fill in the blank. And that's the trigger. And that's the thing that causes your heart to beat fast and you just can't think clearly. Where do you go with it? Once you can recognize, oh, that thing is happening again, it's not only in your nervous system soothing it, but taking the response away from the other person so it no longer triggers you. It's almost like once you recognize it, oh, that was just an eye roll. Oh, that was talking about me in third person. Some games that I will give clients, especially at the negotiation table, when these things are triggering to them, like figure out what they are before you're sitting at the table, because it's really hard in the heat of the moment to access
100%.
your toolbox. You need to know beforehand.
Yeah.
But let's just say the eye roll and the third person talk is coming. Maybe you go into that meeting and you say, okay, our meeting starts at 2. I think they're going to roll their eyes the first time by 2:11. And then you sit and you observe. It's 2:08, it's 2:10, 2:11, they rolled their eyes, I win. It sounds crazy, but it takes you out of the event and the emotion of it. It removes it from you, and it makes it so much easier when you come up with these kind of, they're games really, to distance yourself. You're changing the game. You're changing the negotiation. You're changing the dynamic.
Yeah.
And that other person, they're used to you being triggered. And you're going to look at them and in your head go, 2:11, I win. You rolled your eyes. And they're not going to know what to do because they're used to you feeling
Right.
sad,
Right.
feeling.
Yeah. And I think that as I'm listening to you, I have a saying that was shared with me when my mom was going through dementia, to be expecting and accepting. When you're expecting and accepting of, in this case, the reactions that cause you to have a reaction, and you're accepting, it's like my spouse rolls his eyes, my spouse says nasty things, and you're expecting and accepting of it, that just unplugs the trigger. That's what I hear you saying is, how do you enter whatever the negotiation is, aware of and unplugging your trigger? And if you're expecting it and you're accepting that, yep, this is what he does, this is what she does, that's going a long way to unplug that trigger. And I love the game that you put on it, because then it's like, now I'm not focusing so much on them doing something bad or nasty or traumatizing. I'm focused on my game. I'm focused on how many times. I think it'll happen 4 times. And so Love that idea. Great.
Yeah, you come up with whatever works for you
It's a
based on what they
mental
do.
shift.
But yes, and I love the unplugging. That's exactly what you're doing. You're trying to put yourself in a space where the thing that always got to you no longer gets to you. You've disarmed it.
Beautiful.
And when you do that, then you're able to move forward more thoughtfully, more mindfully, and less traumatized.
Yeah. And so this is not a one and done. What Brenda is talking about here is an ongoing practice. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. So let's get to the next point, which is the meat of our conversation here today, which is, okay, I'm accessing my rational brain. I'm negotiating these human beings that I love that I brought into the world. I'm negotiating limited finances that now need to be split in half. So forget about what he or she is doing to trigger me. These topics are triggering me because I have my story. I've got my judge in my mind saying, oh my God, it's going to be so bad. Here I am. I've got my list of wants and I'm negotiating. Again, whether it's the kitchen or the mediation
Right.
table. What's the next step?
I think that I'm going to back up to what you just said. Get your list of wants and make sure you are clear on why you want them. So an example I use is sometimes I actually dealt with someone who they wanted 52% of the assets, 52%. Like, why? Why is that? Well, it's more than 50. I win. That was the want. But put the wants in context. What do you want your life to look like when this divorce is over? Because a lot of people think the day of the divorce is when everything ends, and it does not. That's when everything begins. And you're setting yourself up in these discussions for your next life. So know what you want that to look like. Don't just be wanting to win or wanting to get more. Maybe you need more. And maybe there's cause for it. Maybe you've been a spouse who has been at home and not working. Maybe you've been in a long-term marriage and you don't have the earning capacity and retirement is right around the corner and you don't have a long runway to recover from it, but your spouse does. Take into account things like that. Put your wants, your list of wants in context, but be clear on what they are and why. And is it going to be enough for you to live that life down the road when this is all over that you want? Are there enough assets to do that for both of you? If not, what can give? Like, really understand what you're dealing with beyond, oh, I should get 50%.
So I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that, first of all, just that level of consciousness that what they say, ask the four whys. Why do you want the 50%? Because I want to win. Why do you want to win? Because I'm mad at him. And when you keep asking why, you're going to get to what's at the heart of this. And to your point, so often we're so caught on the battlefield, sword out, armor up, that we're not thinking about what's next year and the year after going to look like, and how is all of this going to impact my life, my relationship with, if it's a co-parent, my kids. So get your wants and
Your wants, get your facts. I had a client come to me a couple of years ago and she was working with an attorney. They had a mediation. The offer in the mediation was $80,000. And her attorney went, oh, at least you'll get some money. Like, where's the context? You'll get some money out of what? This is a true story. Some money out of what money? If the marital estate is $100,000, that's an amazing offer. If the marital estate is $800,000, that's not a very good offer. Like, know your numbers going in. And I often find on the financial side, there's not a lot of clarity there. So make sure, know what you need to live, like know those real numbers. It's going to be different than what it was when you were married. Know what you're going to need to retire. Is that doable? And know what your assets truly are. And then the last thing I would add is whatever agreement you come up with, know that you can actually execute that agreement. Because oftentimes I'll see things drafted where it's like, we've agreed on everything. Yes, but does the person who need liquidity have liquidity? Meaning, do they have enough money to pay their bills and pay the mortgage and eat based on your agreement? Or if it's a pension or a retirement account, can you actually divide it? You think you can, you say you can, but can you? So really make sure, know what you need, know what you have, and know if you can actually do what you're agreeing to. Those are all really important
Right.
pieces.
And I think we need some context for this because, so I'm thinking, okay, if we're talking about actually negotiating, I most likely have an attorney unless I'm doing a do-it-yourself. And I don't really want to talk about do-it-yourself divorce because it's such a small percentage. So I'm either mediating, collaborating, or litigating.
Mhm.
So if I'm litigating or collaborating, I have an attorney. And
Mhm.
my attorney should be advising me of legal rights and helping me with the numbers. But you and I probably both have a similar opinion about the numbers and who you should be relying on. So can we just talk about that for a second?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a tendency, and I work with many wonderful attorneys. There is a tendency to put everything in a bucket and divide it in half
Right.
financially, which might not serve the needs. You might be able to take that same bucket and better serve both parties' needs
By
if you
being
divide
more
it different.
creative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like we've done things in the past where if it was really important to a family to keep their kids in private school, but they couldn't, like there was just not enough money to go along, and the wife deserved alimony. In this state, it's called alimony. So they just kept the kids in private school, and her alimony didn't start for 7 years, but that was their agreement. Like you can get creative in order to meet needs. And that's one example, but you can also, I remember looking at someone's settlement, they had 20 retirement accounts, so qualified accounts that are just not as liquid. They're harder to divide, more rules around and whatnot. And your audience might be familiar with Quadro, a domestic relations order. So you have to divide the ERISA accounts with a Quadro. So the attorney had taken these 20 accounts and divided them all in half. 18 of them required a Quadro. That's about, I was in Chicago at the time, that's $600 to $1,000 per Quadro. You didn't need to do it. So if you redid it, we redid it, so there was only one Quadro necessary. It saved them thousands of dollars. So it's really like looking at not only an equitable agreement, but what's the smartest way to go about distributing the family's assets when you're dividing them up.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want just to connect the dots for you. Brenda is a CDFA. And so what she's really describing is the ability of somebody who swims in the waters of numbers and feels really comfortable to be able to be more creative and more strategic about how to take that bucket and divide it in a way that serves everyone. Whereas your attorney, who is schooled and skilled in your legal rights and negotiation, that's their two key skills. And yes, attorneys always deal with numbers, but it's skill number 3. The CDFA or the financial expert is skill number 1. You want to make sure when you're putting your team together and when you're going into negotiations, as Brenda said earlier, that you have all of the facts. And I would strongly suggest that you want a CDFA or some other financial expert on your team who can be that creative voice for you. Is that, well?
I would agree. Like I love digging into the numbers and making a story. And like, I get really jazzed about that. You want someone like that, not someone who is looking at them going, oh, just divide them in half, just be done with it. So that's true. I would also, there are a lot of really exceptional financial advisors, but a couple of cautions there. If you're going through a divorce and the financial advisor has joint accounts, there is an inherent conflict of interest in them giving either party any kind of advice on the finances of the divorce. So that's just something to be aware of. And I was a financial advisor before I came to this work. And it's just a whole different set of math. Regular financial planning, college financial planning, retirement financial planning is entirely different than divorce financial planning.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too much down that rabbit hole. We've covered that a lot, but all to say, as we're talking about negotiations, we're talking about knowing and being able to read what your body's saying and your tells. We're talking about knowing how to regulate in whatever situation, being crystal clear on your wants, having the facts around your finances, having the right team and the right members of your team supporting you where you need them. And then do you have one more thing before
I
we?
do. I have one
Ahead.
thing I want to add in the story, just seeing, it's hard, you can see it in my face. But as you go through these negotiations, you probably know your spouse better than any other person on the planet. And then we get into divorce negotiations and we set all that learning aside. And what I would counsel people is really study that. Like, you have a wealth of knowledge about what motivates your partner in these negotiations. So use that, revisit it. Are they motivated by winning? Let them win some things that will serve you. Are they motivated by money? Figure out a way, and I do this a lot in financial settlements. Maybe, someone is really attached to one brokerage account, either depending on how they negotiate, either give them that brokerage account, offset it somewhere else, but they're emotionally attached to it. Depending on the person, you might hold that for ransom. You might really, really want it so you can give it up later.
Right.
But be smart about what motivates your partner in these negotiations, because you know the things that are going to be sticking points for them. You know the things that make them feel like they won. And sometimes it's really worthwhile to give them a win in the negotiation. Do it knowingly. Don't do it as a give up. Do it as you're doing this as
You're
a
strategic.
barter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's strategic. And I think that especially for those negotiating with a difficult or high conflict individual, it's so important to not put all your cards on the table right from the beginning. I want you to talk a little bit about that. But the piece you're talking about is when you know them and you know what's important to them and what's going to get them to be a little bit more flexible, you can use it as a carrot or a stick, but it's leverage, and don't be throwing all your cards on the table and giving up your leverage before that begins. So how do we do that? So I've got my list. I know my spouse and how he or she is wired. And now we're starting to negotiate. What should I be thinking about? Like, what are the perspectives that I should be going into the actual negotiation with?
Know where you want to end. Know that first. Know what is your reasonable bare minimum, as opposed to, I'll have people, child support is an interesting one, but it's a good example where someone will be told by one of their professionals, we're going to fight for you to not pay child support. Well, come on, that's just silly. They're your children, pay child support. Don't go down unrealistic paths. Or let's say it's a long-term marriage, a 30-year marriage. One of the partners was a stay-at-home parent for 25 of those years. And the other one is like, I'm not going to pay any alimony. Depending on the state you live in, that might be the case, but most often in that fact pattern, you're going to pay alimony. Know what is reasonable and know where you have room.
And I think that it reminds me of a story from many years ago. I was working with this lovely guy, CFO, and his wife had whatever, cheated, done some other displeasing things, had two young girls, and wanted to keep the marital home, wanted to be a 50-50 parent, but he really had an issue with alimony. And when we sat down and talked about it, and I asked him to describe, because he earned so much and she earned so little bit, even if she got 50%, I was like, tell me the lifestyle your children are going to live 50% of the time while they're at mom's, and tell me how you feel about that. And it was such a mindset shift for him, because it became not about mom and me being mad at mom and everything that went on there. Their lifestyle with dad was still going to be higher because but at least he was like, I get it. I totally get it. That's exactly what I needed to hear. And so sometimes it's how you're shifting your mindset so that
Yeah.
you can do what's right. And if you have
Mhm.
to be thinking about the kids, then fine.
Yeah, a similar story. I was working with a couple, doctor and a nurse, who were getting divorced, long-term marriage, adult children, and his sticking point was alimony, not paying you alimony. And she had worked the whole time they were married, but his income was so much higher. And we projected forward, like based on what he was proposing, he would have $15 million at retirement and she would have about a $500,000, and that would be gone within a few years, lifestyle wise. And once he could see that, and then we looked again at when she got alimony, she's going to be comfortable in retirement, not wealthy by any means, but comfortable. And he was still going to have $12 million.
Right, right.
It made it really easy for him to go, oh, okay.
That
So
makes sense.
sometimes that is important. Like, it's not just the 52%, it's how are your lives going to actually be? Is this livable? And it depends on the assets. Sometimes there just aren't enough to go around. Sometimes there are plenty.
So we're looking at what my wish list is, what my bottom line is, which you said, which
Mhm.
is really important. Getting behind the position and what's going on, that's your position. And you're doing all this with a rational mind. What are some of the other things that we need to be cognizant of as we enter negotiations?
As far as financial settlements or
Not
overall
more the
strategy,
negotiation. Is there anything else on the skill of negotiating before we get into the weeds of what you're negotiating? So is there anything else that we want the listener to really be aware of in terms of the skill of negotiating to get to the end where you can live a good post-divorce life?
I think allow it breathing room, allow
Mm,
time. And that's a hard thing for people to do because you want to get in there and you want to get it done. You want decisions, you want it to move. Sometimes things need to settle. Sometimes they need some space. Sometimes when someone starts in this, it's a long process often. And someone starts, what they want is not the same as what they want 6 months later. And it's not the same as a year. Like, it needs to settle. And people get very frustrated with the time that these negotiations take and the time that divorce, the process itself takes. Allow yourself to settle into that because it might in the end be a good thing. You might need some of that time to really, like we say, make the good decisions for yourself, but also to just sit with what is and isn't important, to understand things better. Priorities may shift. And what I often see is at the beginning, especially if there's infidelity or cheating or hiding money, things like that, it's really anger and retribution driven.
right.
I remember I had a client and she's like, her husband had cheated and he had money and she wanted him to lose his license. She wanted him basically put out of business. I'm like, okay, do you realize that if he does, then he cannot pay you child support or alimony or like that? And she did not care. I'm like, I respect that. Okay, that is your decision. 3 months later, she's like, no, 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 I walk that all
Yeah,
back
I'm with
because things do settle, and with space, we're better able to at least give ourselves time to know what we want, to know what is really important. It's kind of filters out ideally over time. Not always, sometimes it amps up.
right, right.
But if you look at it with the perspective of, okay, whatever the decision is, I'm going to sit with this. You don't have to make it right then. You don't have to be in a 9-hour negotiation and agree at the end because, you're being pressured to. If you're not feeling good, if whatever your tell is, you're feeling it in your neck, you're feeling it in your stomach, whatever it is, if you're feeling that, don't agree. You don't have to.
Right. That's true. In the moment, you never have to agree. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things I've had a lot of this going on lately is the reaction to the proposal and the counter proposal. And it's fascinating because every client of mine, no matter how emotionally regulated they are, they react as if their spouse's proposal is the new law. And I'm like, it's a proposal.
Mhm.
They could ask that you spend the next 20 years standing on your head whistling Dixie. It's a proposal. The fat lady hasn't sung, nothing's been agreed to. What I'm hearing is you disagree with the proposal, but the angst that comes with it, the audaciousness that such a proposal was put forth. And so I find that it's really interesting. I want to bring this up because I would love for you to speak to it, because there's back and forth proposals, and some of them are completely off the rails and ridiculous, and some of them are just a little bit more, a little bit off, or a little bit something. But the emotional reaction to them is almost always, how dare you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're
Well,
proposing. It's a proposal. It's a negotiation. You don't have to agree, but how do we get people to tamp down the reaction to the proposals? Because I feel like you could save so much energy if you just knew, okay, I'm proposing, my spouse is going to come back with something that I don't agree with. We're not nearly there yet.
mhm. I find that exact same thing. And it's almost as though the proposal itself is a denial of everything that went on in the marriage. It's like that proposal encapsulates that I was not valued in the marriage, all the things that I did were not appreciated. Like I am
The
totally,
story, the big story, the
yeah,
lifetime story that comes with the proposal. And I'm not making fun of anyone here. I'm just saying, I like to bring lightness to it, but there is something like, pay attention to the stories that you create around the counter proposal that comes from your spouse. And it's fine to say, it's totally unrealistic. There's no way that would happen. But notice the emotional angst, as if it's so personal. It feels so personal when you get a counter proposal that is so off from what you were hoping for.
I go two different directions with that. One is the whole game playing thing, which I do resort to quite a bit because I just think it takes stuff out of reality. And
What does
sometimes
that mean,
that
Jane?
could be a good. So you get this proposal and you look at it and it's like, this is ludicrous. What are you possibly thinking? Come up with counterpoints that are equally as ludicrous in your head. Diffuse it. Like anything you can do to diffuse,
Mm.
lighten. You said you like to lighten things up. Lighten it up. Play games like that. Like that's comical. And why would you think that, 6 months of this was just cases come to my head. I had a 26-year marriage and he offered her 12 months. She had never worked, 12 months of alimony, 12 months, 26-year marriage. That's cute.
Silly. It's just silly, right?
It's
Right. And
silly.
I think that
So, and you look at it and go, that's just silly. Now she did look at it and be like, how am I going to live? Of course she did.
right, as if it was just signed, sealed, and
It
delivered by
was,
the
yeah,
judge.
like this is not going to happen.
Right.
The courts wouldn't support it. There's no reason for it.
So I think that when the proposals come back and forth, it's pretty like human nature to create almost like a value story. If you would propose something so little, you don't think I'm a good parent. If you would propose something so
Right.
off, you never loved me and you didn't value. And so the story then creates all of the suffering and puts you back in your amygdala where you can't think straight. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I think even before you do that final negotiation, there's all of that back and forth that just
Yeah.
creates so much upset.
And if you have a basis, if you start out with what is it going to take for me to live, and you get this proposal that is ludicrous, like 12 months of alimony for a non-wage earner after a 26-year marriage. Okay, we've done the work. You know what it's going to cost you, fill in the blank, $3,000 a month to live. Your $1,000 a month of alimony, that is not sufficient. Counter it with reality.
Right.
Because sometimes those proposals, it's just a fishing expedition.
100%.
There's
And can you just elaborate on that? I think that's such an important piece for people to understand. When the proposals start going back and forth, it's not reality. It's the beginning of a ping pong game.
yeah. Yeah. And you can treat it just kind of like this is a learning experience. What are we learning from what they are offering?
Yeah.
What are we learning from their responses? If they won't budge on a specific area, there's something behind that. What is it?
Right.
And can that be leveraged or utilized to your advantage as you work through this. Like alimony is frequently a sticking point. All right, are there enough assets to not pay alimony? Can you just take more in assets? Might that cut to the chase and solve some of these, like the back and forth dilemma? It's like picking up the rock and looking at what's underneath and trying to figure out what the reasons are for what's being offered. First one, usually I think, is it's a fishing expedition. So if I'm offering really, really low, are they going to counter really, really high? Or are they going to counter just a little bit higher? Because then you know what the next counter will be.
So I have, again, going back to my audience of people, my longest standing client is going into her 11th year in court. Someone in the middle just came to celebrate with me, finishing after 5 years. We do tend to face the locked in, unrealistic, inflexible, I will leave the children, the bank account, and everything else bloody on the playing field. And it's exhausting. And there's sometimes legal abuse in there on top of everything else. I'll just keep putting court orders in or ignoring court orders so that we're paying all of this.
Kind of wearing it down.
Do you have it from that expertise of negotiating? Do you have any sage advice for my audience when they find themselves in that? It's like the Ironman triathlon that you've ran 3 times back to back, and you're just so darn exhausted and worn down and worried and scared and wondering, like, is there ever going to be life after this? Like, do you have any sage advice on the negotiating front for people like that?
I will tell it through a story. I had a client who was in a situation like that where it just kept going on. And the minute there would be an agreement, there would her going to be ex would renege on the agreement or agree to 90% of things and then not 10% and just walk away. And it just felt like she was never, ever getting anywhere. And she called me I was not at the mediation. She called me and said, I think I'm just going to agree to buy the piece, because she was exhausted. She was just fried. And I said, is the piece for sale? And she thought about it. And she's like, no, it's not. So you have to know your situation. Like you might cave or concede or agree to things that you wouldn't have because you are worn down.
Yeah.
If you do it knowingly, you are empowered and you are in control. If you do it because you think you're going to get a result that is unrealistic, in her case, it was buying the piece, there was never going to be peace in this relationship, in this situation. And once she paused and thought about it, she was like, no, you're right. Like all I'm doing, it's like, this is perpetuating the pattern of their marriage.
Right.
Another thing to look at, there are, especially in high conflict divorce cases, repetitive patterns. And if you're going through the divorce with the same patterns of relationship that you went through your marriage, it's like fighting a fight you don't have to. The game has changed. You're negotiating to get out of it. And if you're treating it as you did when you were in the marriage, you're still in the relationship. You're still fighting the same fight. It's going to have the same outcome it always did. Something needs to change. So I'm kind of getting off track with your question. I'll center back on your question. When you're exhausted, I guess it's time to dig deep and look at, can you find the strength to move forward? Is it worth it? And is what you are holding out for even available? If it's not, you might want to make the choice to stop. There's the cost benefit analysis to this whole thing. There's weighing what is
100%.
my own divorce. I was entitled to lifetime alimony based on the duration of marriage. And I took 4 years, just enough to get my kids out of high school. It was like in dollars and cents. That was a high price to pay. But in my own dignity, in my own self-worth, in my own knowing of that relationship and how it would play out if every single month for the rest of my life, he had to send me a check.
That's
like
all
that power struggle there, it wasn't worth it to me.
Right, right. And I would say my story is my divorce settlement, as many of my listeners know, was $60,000 in debt. So there was no money being handed out. But I was supposed to get child support, and we were in the courts, but heels locked in 3.5 years into it. The judge yelled at us, sent us into the conference room. And my attorney was about to jump across the table at my soon to be ex. And I accepted it. And it was like 40% of what I deserved for child support. And I remember just looking at him and I was like, I did not marry you for your money. God knows. I do not need you for your money. And I will not leave this room married. And my attorney was like, don't sign it. And I was like, give me the paper. I'm signing it. And when I walk out of this room free, I am going to be the happiest woman in town.
So
And so,
you
like you
knew
said,
you.
it was a conscious decision. I was exhausted. I definitely found him utterly displeasing. But for me, the greater value
Yeah.
was closing the door and moving on. And did it do anything for our relationship, good, bad, or indifferent? No. All it did, just like you, it gave me my dignity. I felt empowered doing it. And yeah, no, I don't need to sit here and deal with this anymore. And so I have clients who have situations that are so hard and they can't do anything but stay in it because they're screwed if they don't, and they
Right.
don't see where it's going. Ultimately, guys, no divorce stays in court for forever. Having the right support team is vitally important. Brenda, your tips on negotiating are great, both day to day as well as when you get down to negotiating the settlement. I so appreciate you coming and chatting with our listeners. Can you share where people can find you and if you have a free gift, what that is?
People can find me at Bridging Divorce Solutions is my website. I'm on Instagram and there's a Facebook business page. So that's
All of those are in the show notes, folks, so you don't have to go looking for it. And what is your free gift?
we have put together a post-divorce checklist that is your new normal. Oftentimes people, like we talked about earlier, people get done, like day of the divorce, I'm done, it's over. But there's still a lot of cleanup to do. There are a lot of things that need to be taken care of financially, funds transferred, beneficiaries changed, all of that. So we put together a checklist that'll help people kind of walk through getting that stuff done.
Beautiful. Go to Brenda's website, grab the free checklist, the free gift, and I hope this helps you with both your day-to-day and your settlement negotiations. Brenda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. And to all of your listeners, there is an end. You are not alone. You will get through it.
Yes. And we'll be back real soon with another episode. Until then, have a great day. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.